Hey, what's up, guys? You're listening to the It Takes a Village podcast. I'm Ashley, your host. This is where the struggles are real, the callings are heavy, the kids are sticky. We come together because it takes a village, and this is your tribe. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad you're listening in today. Today, I have Rachel Bailey on the podcast. Hey, Rachel.
Hey.
She is here to talk about what we don't often talk about, and I pulled you guys in the Facebook group what you wanted her to speak on today, and you guys 100% were like, we need to talk about parent resentment, which I was so surprised, honestly, out of all the things that I had suggested that you could share with us about, but when I was thinking about it, I was like, that makes sense, because we don't talk about it.
Totally. We don't talk about it, and it really influences our behavior and our mood. So, yeah, it's important to talk about it.
Okay, so first off, I guess let's just get in there and get in the mess and the muck and talk about why we need to have this conversation. Why do we feel this in the first place, and why do you think there's so much shame around the reason that we feel this way?
I think we feel this way. It's funny because, my background is in clinical psychology, so I know all the psychology stuff, and I think with emotions, it can get muddy and complicated. However, with resentment, resentment is a sign almost 100% of the time that we are not setting boundaries. So if we think about all the times that we're resentful, if you can usually point it back to a boundary you're not setting. It's almost like that linear, whereas many emotions are not. Resentment really is. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's so prevalent, and we don't want to talk about it because we want to show the world that we're doing it all and we can handle it. We don't need to set boundaries. But then the resentment seeps in, and it really affects our mood and our behavior, how we treat our kids, how we treat our spouse, how we treat our friends. So it's pervasive.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the most common boundaries that we don't have? Just so we can get an idea of what a boundary exactly is.
Exactly. So it could be something with our kids from, maybe they want for young kids, they want an extra bedtime story, and we are exhausted, and we don't have the energy to do it, but we also don't have the energy to deal with their tantrum. Gotcha. So we just give in. Or, whatever our kids want, because we just don't have the energy to deal with the repercussions. So we don't set those boundaries. Or with our spouse, maybe we don't ask them to do things around the house. Maybe, I work with a lot of stay-at-home moms who think it's their job to take care of the home. So I'm not going to ask my husband to do anything. And then all this resentment builds up.
Yeah.
So it could be also not saying no when someone asks you to do something. You have 100 things on your plate and you're like, hey, I already have 100 things. I can handle 101. So you say yes to doing something else.
Of course we do.
Yeah.
There seems to be a theme, as you were listing those examples, there seems to be a theme of we come up with this short-term solution, which is I don't want to deal with it tonight. I don't, even though I'm tired, just letting them have their way seems like what's easiest right now. But then long-term, it always bites us in the butt.
Yes, exactly. And that's so funny that you say that, because everything that I teach, and I have my own podcast, and it's called Your Parenting Long Game. And I talk about the difference between short-term parenting and long-term parenting.
Yeah.
And it's funny that when I talk about long game parenting, it doesn't take longer or even necessarily more energy. It just lasts longer. We think that tantrum, I don't have the energy, but it's not that hard to deal with the tantrum. And then we have a lot more energy later because kids aren't pushing every single time.
Yes. All the time.
Yeah, all the time, right.
That is hilarious. So you also talk about, I love that, because I've listened into your podcast, and a lot of it is really it's just thinking about it in that way of, I need to buckle down now because later it's going to pay off so much more. And like you said, it's not harder, but do you think there is such a thing as having too many boundaries?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we can close ourselves off from the world too. And often we do that, if we're anxious or we don't want to face discomfort. So we set too many boundaries. Absolutely. Yeah.
So how does resentment come into play? Do you think, I guess we just kind of continuously do, not realizing that later on, because we're doing so much and we're overwhelming ourselves and we're piling on so much that we just, I don't know, I don't want to say, what is the word I'm looking for? It just turns into this natural resentment of, man, like because of you I'm so tired, or man, because of you like, or I could be doing this or I could be doing that. How do we deal with that as moms, and how do we overcome those negative feelings? Because I feel like it's one of those vicious cycles of we're putting ourselves through it. We feel this way. We feel bad for feeling this way. We put ourselves through it, like over and over again.
That is such a cycle that I see as well. And part of it is realizing there are things that we are going to have to do. Like, you can't set boundaries on everything. You do have to do the laundry, and you do have to do like all the things you have to do as a parent. But we also, if we think of those things as things that we don't want to do, and it takes energy to do the things that we don't want to do, we're doing all the time what I call making withdrawals. And we have to make withdrawals. Like, we have to do those things. We just aren't making enough deposits. And so just if you use this simple example of, let's say, a mom is running around and on the weekends doing a million things around the house, and she looks at her husband who's sitting on the couch and watching TV. That's going to create huge resentment.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if she sat down too with him, she wouldn't be as resentful. So if she just realized, what is it that I need, and how can I give myself that? And I'm not just talking about self-care. Like, I always talk about this a lot. Self-care is like bubble baths and manicures, and that's great. But I actually talk about self-treatment. How are you treating yourself? Are you thinking about what matters to me, and how can I make time in my schedule for that to happen? And when we treat ourselves better, we can do all of the other things that we still have to do. So it's really about making those deposits and thinking about, are we treating ourselves as well as we're treating other people?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Self-treatment, I feel like, is such a more powerful word than like self-care feels really like fluffy and I don't know. And self-treatment reminds me of like, how would I want my daughter to treat herself? And how should I be treating myself? That I feel like that's more powerful. But I wanted to ask you, with the example that you brought up about, sitting down next to her husband, how do we get moms to sit down in the first place? Because
I love that question. Yeah. So I find that it all comes down to handling discomfort. So setting boundaries, it's not like it's this thing where if you set a boundary, all of a sudden you're going to feel better. You don't. You feel worse at first.
Yeah.
You're like, well, sitting down, but I can't enjoy sitting down because I have all these to-do things in my head. It's not enjoyable.
Yes, yeah.
But if we can do a couple of things, number one, handle the discomfort of, not be uncomfortable when your to-do list is still existing somewhere out there, and just be in the moment without, having the thoughts of your to-do list take over. But also, I work with a lot of busy parents on changing their calendar and their to-do list. And how can we be comfortable taking some things off of our to-do list? It's also uncomfortable to do that. When we can handle discomfort and reducing our load and, being uncomfortable sitting, and being able to enjoy sitting there on the couch, that's actually when things shift in parents. And that's when we can enjoy life and we are a lot less resentful. It really does come down to, can I be uncomfortable?
Yeah, I think I've experienced that too, just because I'm one of those people that when I sit down, I can think of a million other things I could be doing in that moment, especially like with my kiddos when they're playing and they don't necessarily need me or like want to interact with me, but I know that just my presence is important to them, and that is like a huge struggle for a lot of us, and myself. I'm saying that because it's a struggle for myself, because you're just sitting there and you're not interactive necessarily.
Right.
And then so your mind is just like, oh, I could be doing the laundry right now. Oh, this is, there's that dish that I forgot to get, or this and that and the other. And so sitting through that and then just thinking, I'm really uncomfortable right now, but just staying there and working through it and then walking away and being okay with the fact that like, that was hard. And then, and then you can continue on, but you are present. And then, each time you do it, I feel like it gets a little bit easier, because now when I do it, I'm like, I'll get to it later, which, months ago or years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And the more experience you have just sitting there, and even in the moment, you can change your mindset a little bit to lessen the discomfort. You can, instead of thinking I have all these things to do, you can sit there and think, yeah, I have all those things to do. And in this moment, I'm doing something else that's really important to me. I'm providing that connection for my child.
Yeah.
And when you shift your mindset, the discomfort lessens. But realistically, it's still going to be back there. But I love what you said. The more you practice being uncomfortable, and that's one of the things I do with the parents I work with, when you can conquer discomfort, you can conquer anything. And then really you can start to live a life that is more consistent with your values.
Yeah.
You really can.
One of the things that I've learned to start saying in my head is to change what I say in my head, which is, instead of saying, I have to do this, I have to do that, it's like, I get to sit with my kids right now.
Yeah.
I don't have to do the laundry. Like, I get to, be home with them. I get to pick them up from school, like those kinds of things. And it feels so silly that I don't know. It's one of those things that you're like, that's not going to work. That's dumb, but when you really do say it, like in my head, I'll say it driving to like school. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Like,
Yeah.
you're just like,
It's so
what?
true. And you think it won't make a difference, but this goes back to self-treatment because,
Yeah.
self-care could take time. Like you have to go to the spa or go get your nails done or sit in a bubble bath. But self-treatment actually happens in a millisecond. And for busy parents, that's great. If we just change the way we talk to ourselves from, yeah, I have to do this to I get to do this, or if we make a mistake from I'm a horrible parent to, you know what, I make mistakes and I'm modeling what that looks like to my child.
Yeah.
Those small shifts have a huge impact. And there's a lot of science behind why that has a huge impact that I could even go into sometime, but it does have an impact. And the more you change how you treat yourself and talk to yourself, the better you feel and the less resentful you are.
Yeah. So you mentioned these emotional deposits, and I want to talk about that and kind of give tangible ideas of what that looks like and how that can help us in these feelings with like resentment and kind of trying to pull ourselves out of this pattern that we have.
Yeah, so one of the ones I've been really focusing on now, although I didn't name it, is we have 5 emotional needs that I talk about. One of them that I've been focusing on is significance. And significance is really the need we all have as human beings to know that we matter and to feel seen and to feel heard and understood and respected. And I do certainly teach about doing this for our children. You have to allow your child to feel seen and heard and respected, but we also have to do it for ourselves. We have to, one simple concrete example is just the tone we use with ourselves. Just shifting from a tone of judgment to a tone of curiosity can be so eye-opening. So instead of saying, why did I do that, which is full of judgment, we can say, why did I do that? And curiosity leads to answers. Judgment leads to beating ourselves up and feeling horrible.
Yes.
And all I did was I switched the tone and how I asked myself that question. And it's amazing that when you can be curious with yourself, you're so much more respectful of yourself, but it gets to solutions. Oh, I did that.
Yeah.
I'm tired, so I need to go to bed a little bit earlier. And, you can find solutions to the problems you face.
Yeah, I can totally see that. What are some of the other ones that you had?
So let's see. Another emotional need that we have is control. And a lot of us as moms especially, we like
I forget about it.
And that's honestly, I think a lot of it is, there are 2 things, but first of all, we do have 100 plates in the air, and it's like if we don't have control, we're going to drop them all. But I think there's also a lot of pressure on us to be a certain way, and we feel like if I'm in control, I can be that way. So control is another area where I think we all struggle, and one of the things I stress with parents I work with is stop trying to control what's out of your control. We try to control our kids' behavior. We try to control our spouse. Like, what do I need to do to make him pick up his socks? We try to control the future. If I do this, then my child is going to be happy. And ultimately, all of that is out of our control. But if we can control what is in our control, which is our attitudes, our behavior, our thoughts, and it's amazing that when we control those things, and I've seen this over and over and over, and I do exercises with clients on this, when you focus on what you control, it's amazing that what you're trying to control actually falls into place. The more we try to control others or the future, the less likely those things are to happen. The more we control ourselves and what is under our control, the more things fall into place the way we want them to. So that's another deposit, just focusing on what's in our control.
Isn't that funny that we, like, for me, like I was an avid like type A. I want all the things in my control. I want to plan all the things. I want it to go exactly the way I want it to go. But the more I did that, the more it didn't happen that way. And then I'd get mad and frustrated. And I'm like, I think it's so funny that really the thing that is hardest for us to do, or for me to do, which is to control myself or handle, worry about my own dang self, then everything else turns out the way that I want. Like if I that is so funny.
Yeah. It is crazy, but just a really good example because a lot of people talk to me about their kids are like having meltdowns or something. So we try to stop the meltdown, which is controlling them. But interestingly, when we stay calm and in control of our own emotions, their meltdown is going to last much less long and it's going to be much less intense. So I know a lot of people have these emotional, kids with they're controlling and strong-willed, but when we control ourselves and not them, it's amazing how things change.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for mamas who are listening and they're like, yes, 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 I feel all these things. Okay, like I'm admitting that it is resentment. Like what I'm feeling is resentment. How do they take the first steps to acknowledge it and start to kind of pull themselves out of that?
That's a great question. So practically speaking, I would actually identify the areas where they feel resentful. So I am resentful when when I've asked my child something 5 times and they don't listen. So really focus on a scenario and then think about what boundary could be set so that you won't feel so much resentment. And in that example, it may be, I need to, after the first time I ask my child to do something, I need to go over there and make sure that they are doing what I ask because if not, I'm going to be resentful. So that is in our control. We can stop what we're doing. And by the way, that's why we often don't go over after the first time because we're in the middle of doing 100 other things. But if we stop and set a boundary and show our kids we're serious, they actually do listen. They really do. When they know we're serious. The reason they don't listen till the 5th time is because we've shown them that they don't
ask 5 times.
Or that they only listen when we yell because we've shown them that they don't have to listen until we yell.
Yeah.
So very practically, find a scenario, trace it to a boundary, set that boundary, and then be okay with it's going to be uncomfortable at first, but the more you set it, then whatever you're setting the boundary against is actually going to go away.
Yeah. It's like any new thing that we're going to do with our family. It always takes time for it to fully take place and like everybody to get used to the new situation. Do you think that we need to be having a conversation with our spouses when we're going through this?
100%, because you know what? Our spouses are resentful towards us too. So yeah, the more we can be aware of what the resentment is and figure out what the boundaries are, the better off things are. And resentment is really, it's almost like a kryptonite to a relationship.
Yeah.
It will eat away at it and eat away at it and eat away at it. Whereas the solution really is usually quite simple. It's not easy because it takes discomfort, but it's usually very simple.
Yeah. I literally almost dropped my pen because you said, would you say that, resentment is often like from both sides? I was totally thinking just how I felt, my kid to parent relationship personally, not the fact that my husband might actually be resentful towards me in this situation as well. Like, I don't know why that. And then when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that probably does happen. How do we have those conversations? How would you suggest that we initiate that conversation with our spouse to make sure that we're not creating resentment between us, or that we're not creating resentment because of, like, I don't know, like how do we even approach that conversation?
Yeah, I love it. So it's really important to approach it too so that they don't get defensive, because if someone gets defensive, then they're, immediately shut down. So the best advice I have very practically is always start in your spouse's world. So first, kind of brace yourself for what you're going to hear. Know that you might hear some things that you don't want to hear, but then start in your spouse's world and say, you know what? I would love to hear if there's anything that I do that makes you resent me a little bit. And ask them first and be able to listen to that without getting defensive yourself, because ultimately you don't want them to get defensive.
Right.
So you need to kind of model what that looks like. Listen to it, take it in. And then once you've really heard them, then they're going to feel safe. The way humans feel safe is when someone else listens and really genuinely takes it in. And then you can say, is it okay if I share something that I've been resentful about and maybe I'm not setting a boundary correctly? So you're not attacking them.
Yeah.
You're actually getting into their world, and then you're taking some responsibility too.
Okay, guys, I hope we're taking notes here, because for me, that doesn't come naturally. One, I have a tendency to interrupt people when they talk, which, as you can tell, I've done several times already. But that, and, just the way that we frame the statement of, like, instead of coming at them like, well, you don't, you're on the couch when I am doing the dishes and I'm doing all the things, and you've never once, like, I am so guilty of doing that. And I think that you're right that if somebody was to approach me like that, immediately my walls would go up and I would be ready to fight. Like, well, you did this and that, and, to try to kind of defense myself to the situation. So I think that those sentences that you provided were like amazing.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can sense within a millisecond because we're survival based creatures. So we can sense within a millisecond whether someone is on our side or against us. And it's not even with the words, it's with the energy that they're exuding. So if you are walking towards your spouse, they can feel your energy.
Yeah.
Your child too. So that's so important to understand what our energy is as we're approaching someone. And if we're approaching them in an attacking way, it will not get anywhere.
Yeah. Okay, so these are awesome tips about this. I am so grateful that you're sharing all these because I feel like we're coming up for air, guys. Like this is awesome. So I wanted to ask you, what are some other common situations that you see in regards to resentment that I haven't touched on that are frequent that maybe we need to conversate about here, so that way other mamas who feel this way can feel heard, can feel seen, and maybe can find a solution?
That's a great question. And I think one of the things that we sort of touched on, but I would really want to emphasize is that we do need to talk about our resentment. We can't hold it in because when we hold it in, like I said, it eats at us, it eats at relationships. One of the things that I really love to do with parents, everyone wants to work with me individually and one-on-one, which is great, but I really encourage parenting groups when I'm working with parents because every single group that I've ever run, which is a lot, whenever parents are starting to talk about resentment, it's like this sense of relief. Like I'm not alone in this feeling. Yeah. And it's a lot of laughter, sometimes some crying, but like I'm not alone in this. And the other benefit of talking about it with other people is that setting boundaries does take some energy and some courage. If you can like form a pact with other ladies that you're going to do this, that's why some of the parenting groups I run are actually moms who are friends. I love doing that. Because then you're going to encourage each other to set those boundaries. And when it doesn't feel good, you can text your friend and be like, this is so hard. And your friend can text back, yes, it totally is. But even when I run parenting groups with strangers, I think that support, just talking about it and encouraging each other can mean the world.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that because, when you're going through it, you need somebody to vent to.
Totally.
Yeah, that is amazing. I think that, we need to talk about it more, which is why obviously when I polled the Facebook group, everybody said that's exactly what we need to talk about. And so there's proof by that. But Rachel, where can everybody find you if they want to like Dive diaper? I have a newborn. I'm changing a lot of diapers right now. So that's apparently what
we've all been there.
Yes. How can they dive deeper with you? And not only, because I know you don't only just cover resentment, you cover like a myriad of topics. So what are some of those? How can they connect with you? And give us some of that info.
Yeah, so my website is rachel-bailey.com. I have a podcast called Your Parenting Long Game. And then I'm also on YouTube. I have a ton of videos. I think you can just search Rachel Bailey Parenting. I'm on Facebook at Rachel Bailey Parenting, Instagram there as well. I also, I do work with parents in a number of different ways. So I do talk about resentment and a lot of what parents are going through. I do a lot of time management for overwhelmed, busy parents, but then I do the traditional parenting stuff and I kind of mush all this together. It's how are we doing as parents? And then I teach parents how to motivate more responsible behavior, more motivation in their kids, more resilience. That's another big thing that I teach parents. So it's sort of the myriad of those things. And I do consultations, but really, like I said, I try to encourage parents to go into groups, which I'm running all the time.
Hey guys, I hope that episode was helpful. You guys asked for that topic. I wanted to give it to you because obviously this podcast is of no use to you if it doesn't cover the things that you want to hear. So always let me know things, topics, conversations, whatever, what have you, that you need from me and from this podcast, from other people, and I will hopefully try to get it out there for you. Make sure you go and share this podcast with other mamas so that way they can get the encouragement, the empowerment, the help, the tools, the tricks, the whatever you want to call it, that they need, because as you all know, it takes a village. I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your week.